everybody. This is George K with Action Coach. We've got another business spotlight interview for you. We've got a guest, Rick Tjia, with Choreography Online. And Rick, thank you for your patience. I know we've tried to get together a couple of times on this interview, and I'm glad to have you on the interview.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
So, Rick, you've got a few things going on. Your entrepreneurial journey has been pretty amazing. I know you started out, or at least a little ways back, you were in Cirque du Soleil. Is that correct?
Yes, I was. I didn't start out in Cirque du Soleil, but I did spend a lot of time there. 17 years, I think.
Wow,
So,
that's quite the journey. An amazing outfit too. This is a question I ask almost everybody. You know, you're in a stable career, 17 years with Cirque du Soleil. Why did you decide to make the jump and go independent as an entrepreneur?
well, I mean, I had been thinking about it for a while. I think there are several reasons behind that. I part of it is that when you're working for someone else, and as great as it was, I mean, working for Cirque du Soleil was fabulous. I mean, it was a really great place to work. Um, but sometimes you have other ideas, you got other things you want to pursue. I had been at Cirque for so long, and though it was a very exciting and challenging job, at some point it's like, okay, I've done that. Um, and the challenge is not really there anymore. So and I also I was I you know one of the things that a lot of people ask me, what's your goal? Like what's your ideal job? What do you want to do? And my answer is not really like I want to do this. I want to be an artistic director. I want to be a choreographer. I want to be a teacher. It's more um I want to take this industry, this performing arts industry, dance, all kinds of performing arts, and I want to push it forward. So
Mm,
the idea is that I want to have this significant and positive impact on the industry as a whole, and that's what I want to leave. And to do that, I have to go a different way. I can't stay in the power, with the powers that be. I kind of have to break off. And that
yeah,
and those are that's the biggest impetus, I think.
yeah. I think when you have a big goal, I think Collins calls it the BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal. It's hard to do that when you're in a lane. When you're working in a company, you're in a lane, and no matter how good you do that lane, it's still one lane. And if you want to have a big impact, you have to be involved in lots of different things. So,
Absolutely.
so I get that. I get that. Great. So what would be your ideal in terms of like in the if you could have everything you wanted in terms of having that impact, what would change in the entertainment business as far as you're concerned with regards to choreography and all of that?
I mean, in this industry, it's like what wouldn't change. It's an industry that is very, in as much as it tries to create, and it's all about creation new content. We tend to do things the same way that we did 75 years ago. And
Mm,
so, to say what would I change? Pretty much everything. I mean,
gotcha.
there's just give you a simple example. Video conference has been used in corporation and business for quite a long time.
Yeah.
I remember my first time training people for a project, training colleagues in Australia for a project on video conference and sharing the screen and all that. That was way back in 2008. The dance industry started using video conferencing at COVID time. And so,
Wow.
so we're talking 2020 when it's been around for a very long time. So, this is the kind of stuff that I kind of just want to take the industry and shake it up and say, listen, there are much better ways of doing things. Um, but you do have to um, put the old things to rest, the old ways of doing things to rest.
I get you. I get you. So, all right. So you make the jump from Cirque to being on your own. What were some of the early challenges that you faced um, creating your image or attracting partners or attracting clients? What were some of the big challenges that you faced?
Um, The challenges were multiple. I mean, our trajectory was a little bit strange because we did like we aimed for a go-to-market for second week of March 2020. Um, and that is the exact week that the market actually disappeared for completely for 2 years, trying to come back the third year, but it's only been really this year that I've started to see actual hope
Wow.
of the industry coming back. So like really come back for sure, not just kind of little attempts. So the you know the ch- there and one of the other challenges is that we started out, I mean, Choreography Online at the base was a multi-sided platform. It was, choreographers can sell licenses to their work and then buyers can buy it. Um, Multi-sided platforms are notoriously difficult to start because of those two. Um, and then to start that in an industry that doesn't really understand copyright and that doesn't as I mentioned, has been doing some things in one way for a very long time. And on top of that, doing at a time where a COVID makes your market disappear. Those are challenges that I think most entrepreneurs don't even have to face. Now, needless to say, I did not put COVID into my business plan because I
No.
never had any idea that was going to happen. So then what we did do um, was I mean, the idea was always to eventually diversify, and COVID forces us to diversify immediately. You
No
know,
kidding. Yeah.
yeah, which was not a bad thing because I do think that in as much as most people, uh, like most experienced entrepreneurs or people who have been creating business for a long time, a lot of them will focus on doing one thing and doing it well. But then again, that's what Kodak did, and that's what Cirque du Soleil did, and that's what A&M Records did. And that was what caused them to have problems, right? So there's a balance, I think, between, there's another school of thought that is like always diversify your sources of revenue. And so I'm kind of the thought that you do need to do both. You need to diversify, but you do need to have enough energy and resources and knowledge to be able to focus on those things and to be able to brand them separately so that markets don't get confused. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So Rick, I'm listening to you and I'm hearing a lot of business vocabulary. Where did you get your business training from?
I got um actual formal training was there were some business courses here in Montreal that I did take like a long time ago. I did take them in French though. So the actual terminology for the last several years has been confusing because some of it I know in French and some of it I know in English. And sometimes I'm talking to English people and I only have the French word in my head and I'm like, what is it? And vice versa. So but yeah, there's that. Uh, and of course, working in a corporation, because even though I was in casting, we worked on a lot of business projects and business models and that kind of thing. Um, Plus, I mean, a lot of reading, a lot of reading, a lot of um, like working with people and talking to other entrepreneurs or actually established people in business um and so that's where it all comes from, you know.
Yeah, an action coach, we put a really high emphasis on learning with our clients because we understand, as you just finished saying, that if you're not constantly learning, not just about your specific trade or field, but about related fields,
Mm,
you could miss opportunities that could help you to build your business. So I'm loving that. And the other thing that I'm impressed about is, we often have the stereotype that artistic folks aren't really keen on business. And I'm hearing from you this breaking that whole mold. We don't
mhm,
have to just be stereotypical, artistic people. We can do both. You're embracing business, you're embracing technology, you're embracing marketing,
mhm,
and of course the art itself. So I think that's a great message for any type of entrepreneur, that you do have to be multifaceted. You can't just be in one lane.
I think you absolutely do, and I think that's probably why the arts, like artists, have so much struggle with things like generating money with organization. A lot of it is that we just don't teach them.
Yeah,
You're an artist, we go, oh, just do your art.
yeah.
Um, but I think also because artists tend to look at business as being some sort of you know, it- money grubbing kind of, uh,
The dark side.
the dark side. Yeah, but it's really interesting, when I teach the choreography course, I do teach entrepreneurship and I teach a little bit of business and marketing, all that stuff. And I like to quote Peter Drucker, Peter Drucker, who was,
Oh, very well.
amazing writings, this man. And one of the things that he says, he talks about, business has to serve a purpose in society. And when you do things for the business, you cannot justify things by just saying it's only good for business. It has to be good for society. And I agree with that. A good business has an important role in society itself. And so it cannot just be like, oh, we're all about the money, because if it's just about the money, at some point, it will just die. Because
Yeah,
if it's just money, that's kind of an empty,
yeah.
you know.
We when you do exit interviews with employees that have left companies, oftentimes, the assumption is, oh, they got a better offer for more money someplace else. And the statistics tell us that money as a reason to leave is something like sixth, seventh, eighth on the list. Usually it's other factors. They don't feel
Mhm.
appreciated. They're not treated well by their management team. They don't believe in the mission of the company. They don't feel that the company is actually achieving anything that they can really get behind. If you're going to spend years of your life, in an organization, you've got to feel like that what you're doing is making a difference, like a
Mhm.
beneficial difference. And especially younger folks today, we understand that they are more concerned about that than previous generations have been.
I think that one of my former directors at Cirque kind of presented it in a good way, in that they said, well, working for Cirque du Soleil used to be a cause. It was a cause. And I think that that's what keeps people with
Yes,
certain companies, why they stay, is because this is my cause. And the
correct.
minute that cause derails and is no longer a cause, I think you're absolutely right. That's when people say, forget it, I'm leaving, you know. And
Yeah,
I've seen people leave for actually less money because
yeah,
of that. Yeah.
yeah, 100%. So you talk about team. How big is your team, Rick?
My team is like a lung in that it goes. So, I mean, the two of us who own, the two main people are me and my partner, Hillary, who lives in France. We do have other people on the team who contribute as needed, because we're not at the point where we can have like all these employees like full time, but at the same time, we're kind of built around tech. And the idea is to be able to run this wherever we are in the world.
Right,
And, with, a lot of the tasks and the repetitive things that nobody wants to do anyway, we use the tech to do that. And so because of the tech, we're able to do a lot with very little. Um, and the other people that we have on and off, they are also very dedicated people who I have made no secret of the fact that they they believe in this company, and those are the kind of people that I want, and then the minute we become like, a multi-billion dollar business, I am definitely going to make sure they're treated well, you know.
right. I love it. So you talked about having two customers. So you've got the artist on one side and you've got the consumer on the other side. Tell us a little bit about those two customer groups for you.
Okay, so the choreographers, we know what a choreographer is. They create dance, and and the typical way that choreographers work is they will get a contract from some production company or a dance company to create a piece. And that usually that contract includes the rights for that piece, either, in perpetuity or for a certain number of, time period, some for a certain number of years. That requires, the choreography to be flown in, there's hotel, all this stuff, salary, and then working with dancers and it's very expensive. Um, but at the same time, that choreography belongs to you and no one else. Um, on the other hand, you have like just hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people and in studios who need to do performances constantly, dance companies, and a lot of them are regional companies, and they might not have that money to, the
Mm,
10, 15, 20,000 or more dollars to bring someone in, but they still need content. So
right.
our way of, uh, um, allowing them to purchase a license to use for a certain amount of time is much more economical. They can still have something from a choreographer who's good and who's either well known or not. It doesn't really matter. You like their work, you like their work.
Hmm.
Um, and to be able to put that work on stage without worrying about being sued or,
Right.
that kind of thing. But the thing about a different dynamic and different advantage is it's also a little bit like, try before you buy. In music, people were sharing, MP3s at the beginning of, the whole Napster thing back at the beginning of the internet. Um, and you had like big record labels saying, don't do this, is stealing. But the odd thing is that you didn't hear the independents crying out. And the reason was because the independent sales were going up because of the sharing.
Right.
And this, at the time, statistically, the statistics were showing that the people who shared the most were also the ones who tended to buy the
Buy
most.
the most, of course,
So
because they're sampling basically.
they're sampling, so if you've got a regional company that doesn't want to spend or can't spend $20,000 on a new choreographer, they can test that choreographer's work for a lower price on their audience. And when the audience says, we like this, then it's worth it to invest.
I love it. Yeah, I
So
love it. It's a great. So I get that you started, in the middle of, well, at the beginning of COVID, and it's been a struggle. What have been some of your successes up till now?
I think one of the things that was really like immediate, so that whole COVID shutdown happened right as we were going to go to market. I was in London at that time. We were going to do it at a dance convention in London. That convention canceled. All my meetings in London were canceled. Um,
Wow.
and so we were like, we need to do something because this model will not work right now. And that's where we came up with this online dance competition where people would
Ah,
send in pre-recorded videos. So we had a choreography division, and we still do choreography division and a dance division, and that hit a nerve. And
it's a great
just,
idea.
oh yeah, people went crazy. And then we added to that a gallery of finalists where the public could vote. And we did that. I mean, we went from um, a thousand, 300 to 1,000 visits a day to 1,000 visits an hour.
Wow.
And yeah, and so at the time, we were considering, because before COVID, we were going into partnership with World of Dance.
Hmm.
And then when that happened, everything shut down. But I was still in contact with World of Dance. And after we opened that gallery for the first time, uh, I called the CMO of World of Dance and we were talking. And I said, look at this happening. What's happening is that we just got like 26,000 um, visits to our site, just for that gallery. And he goes, what do you mean, a month? I said, no, yesterday. And there was this
Wow.
silence on the phone. Um, but yeah, it was quite, I mean, that's where we learned, okay, we're on to something. People like this. This is giving people something that they obviously need. And during the 3 weeks of that gallery, the voting, public voting, we basically busted our bandwidth by 7 times. Yeah.
Wow.
So I think that's a success.
Definitely. Definitely. So what does the future hold? What's your next big step?
I think that there are several big steps. One of them is, I mean, a couple of years ago, we started working on in partnership with another company, and we built a new company called Gemrigig, which is casting software,
Mm,
casting and audition software.
wow.
And so that is starting to gain traction, and we're talking with some very big companies about that. Um, but the other thing is that we are going to relaunch the original business, but
Ah,
with a slightly different strategy. We're trying to find the funds to relaunch because basically launched when the market disappeared. Now we have to relaunch when the market is back. So we're planning that as well. The online dance competition, I think, has value for people. It it has a very large audience, so I think that is worth continuing as well. Um, and through that competition, we also get clients for the choreography course and some other things. So it really I think the future is in steps in that way. Um, but yeah, I mean, one never has as much cash flow as they need or want. Um, but I also think that this has been a very, very particular few years since 2020. Um, so I've had friends who tell me you can't bang your head over it. Nobody predicted it. True. But as CEO of the company, you're responsible for driving the ship. And so
yeah.
it's really hard not to, even though I know no one could have predicted, sometimes I'm just like, well, why didn't I have something, at least something to back that up, So, but
Okay, so aside from that, because that's a big one.
mhm,
Aside from that, if you can go back in time and tell yourself something, knowing what you know now,
mhm.
like earlier on, what advice would you give to yourself to have made your journey easier, faster, more profitable? What would you have told yourself?
I would have told myself to start with much more money than,
Ah,
yeah, I would have planned for more. Um, I think part of it was that I'm so used to doing everything and manage everything. So then in my estimation of the number of people I would need, um, I assumed everyone was kind of like me, which was probably not a good idea. Um,
not
you know,
everybody wants to work for sweat equity.
yeah, not everyone wants to work for sweat equity, but but I think it's more about just the ability to like the amount of work that a single person can do.
Yeah,
And
that's a good
not,
point.
yeah, so not everyone. I think just because I've always been interested in a whole bunch of different things, and I've really learned and mastered a lot of different things, but the average person doesn't necessarily do that. So that's something that I think I should have kept in mind is that most people, have a certain skill set and they're going to stay in that skill set. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good lesson. It's a good lesson, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs, startups especially, they for them working 14-hour days, 6 days a week, it's part of the gig. Not that I recommend that. There is a time and a place, obviously, certainly at the early stages of a business, but you can't expect that level of devotion and commitment from everybody. It's just not gonna,
exactly,
it's not realistic.
exactly. It's
Yeah.
not realistic, and I know there are people who will, and we've been lucky with people who have been generous with their time and generous and, really believing in what we do. Um, I, I, I may not have expressed appreciation as much as I should, But
Mm.
if they're listening to this, I want them to know they are way appreciated. Um, but I can't expect that. You're correct. I cannot expect that of people.
Yeah, and I think it's a good lesson as well to if we agree that money isn't everything in terms of why someone would want to join your mission, why someone would want to join your organization. I think making it clear what your mission is and what
Mhm,
good you are trying to bring into the world, going back to Peter Drucker,
mhm.
I think being able to state that clearly and to not understate it, like not to take it for granted. I think
All right.
reiterating that and bringing it up often is important for keeping the troops motivated. And nothing is better than a pat on the back and an attaboy and
Mhm,
recognition for your contribution. Whether it's a quiet one or whether it's a public one. We know some people are different. Some people don't like a lot of public praise. Some people,
mhm.
something quiet is better. But yeah, never take for granted your people. That's for sure.
I do agree with that, restating the mission, but I also think that it's even stronger if you show
Yeah.
through your actions the mission instead of because I've worked for companies where you hear the mission, but what they're doing doesn't support the mission, and I think it has the opposite effect. You start to not trust the company.
Oh
So,
yeah, 100%. I mean, I take it for granted that if someone says their mission is X and they're not doing X, then they must expect that their people will not be loyal. I mean, if you're not loyal to your own mission, how do you expect your people to be loyal to you? That's just not going to happen.
exactly.
That's great. Well, listen,
Absolutely.
this has been an amazing, amazing conversation. We don't get too many people from the arts on this show, and it was very refreshing to see the tack that you take in terms of merging technology and merging modern business practices and applying it to a very institutionalized part of the art world. And I think we need pioneers like you in every industry, but it's nice to see that's happening in the arts world as well.
Oh, thank you. I'm hoping that more people will do that in my industry, especially an industry that has so much creative potential. And I think that business has more creative potential than artists understand,
Oh yeah.
um, especially things like marketing, business strategies, and I find it extremely creative. You know,
And
um,
vice versa. We're reading a lot that now, given the speed at which things are changing, um, because of technology, because of world events, many other things, having an artistic member of the team, someone who understands creative thinking, understands how to think outside the box from a technique point of view, is something that businesses need to adopt more in their organizations as well. So I think both can learn from each other.
yeah, I think so too. I think so
So
too.
Rick, where's the best place for people to find you before we end this conversation?
Um, I think because we're doing so many things, the best place to find me is probably on social, LinkedIn, Facebook,
Okay.
Instagram.
So
And
what's your
that way,
handle on Facebook?
Facebook is just is actually Rick Tjia 7,
Oh,
my
okay.
first and last name with the 7 on it.
All right. Excellent.
LinkedIn is just my name. There are too many Rick Chias around there, so it's pretty easy
Yeah.
to find. Um, and um, and then Instagram, it's my first and last name, but with a dot in between, Rick dot Chia.
Wonderful. Excellent. Well, Rick, thank you so much for joining us. And I look forward to maybe coming back to this conversation a year from now and seeing what new things that you're breaking out into for a while.
All right, well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.